Welcome to Conversations with Chuck Hester, a weekly podcast designed to inform, entertain, and introduce you to some really interesting and inspiring people. Today's episode is brought to you by Vidyard, the video platform for business. I'm your host, Chuck Hester, and my guest today is Jay Baer. Jay, welcome to the podcast. Oh, Jay, I'm not hearing you. Oh, here we go.
I was some kind of rookie. Hello, Chuck. Nice to see you.
There we go. There we are. I'm sorry.
Congratulations. Thanks to my friends at Vidyard for sponsoring the show as well. Great to be with you. Happy New Year, everybody.
Indeed. Well, let me introduce you to the audience, and then we can get started. Jay's the president of Convince and Convert, a consulting firm that works with the world's most iconic brands, small ones like the United Nations, 3M, and Hilton, and they help them gain their customer and keep their customers. A recent inductee into the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame. He's also an avid tequila collector. I know another person that was on this podcast who is as well, and a certified barbecue judge. I can speak today. It must be the holiday weekend. So anyway, welcome, Jay. I appreciate your time today. And as we were talking about earlier on the show, you're in Indiana right now and hanging out, doing some renovations as far as that goes. So appreciate that. So let's dive into this, man. I want to talk to you specifically. I believe because I was a moderator, as I always am on Content Marketing World, had a chance to talk to you about some things that were going on. But you were one of the few that I think really kind of addressed the pandemic and talked specifically about how the brands and what's going on with the pandemic. And let me, as I mentioned earlier, I was going to do this, but your comment in regards to your presentation, one of the things that really stood out, the pandemic is the single greatest opportunity to grow your business. Elaborate.
Well, if you're going to grow a business disproportionately, you have to have a change in some underlying condition. And the pandemic is certainly that. There are already, and this will be accelerated in 2021, a new breed of winners and unfortunately a breed of losers as well in every category of business. Every category is going to have a new scoreboard, a new leaderboard. And Chuck, it's fundamentally because, and the data bears this out, consumers, and it doesn't matter whether you're B2B or B2C, are willing to make different buying decisions now in the pandemic than they would have in the past. In June or so, the data was 54% of consumers have made a purchase from a business for the very first time. I suspect that number has gone up. And in B2B, which typically is not known for switching vendors very often because of the switching costs associated with that, 20% of B2B companies have changed all of their suppliers since the pandemic. This is an unprecedented amount of movement in who buys what from whom. And I think it's because in a world where everything has been turned upside down, YOLO, right? Like, let's just try something different, right? And partially what you emphasize and what you care about, what you prioritize when making a purchase has changed dramatically as well. For example, when you picked a restaurant, it used to be food quality first, service second, price third. Now it's safety first, right? And second and third. And you sort of take that same premise and blow it out across the entire economy, and you have a huge opportunity. Chuck, I think this is the ultimate double-edged sword for every business. On one hand, your competitors' customers now have a wandering eye. They are willing to switch to you in a way that they may not have been willing to switch to you in the past. However, the converse is also true. Your customers are more willing to defect away from you than they would have been pre-pandemic as well. So the first thing you've got to do is keep your current customers. The next thing you've got to do is use content or other marketing approaches to go out there and grow your business. And I really, really believe, and I talk about it in every keynote speech, that for a lot of people, the people who get this right, 2021 will be the single greatest growth year they will ever have in their entire professional careers.
And I've seen, because I was with a digital agency for a while during the pandemic, and we had to deal with content and how do we address content without pandering, best way to describe it. But that to a certain extent is kind of, we've moved past that, if you will. We're safe. Here's how we are. Here's what we do. How does a business, B2B or B2C, address that, if you will? How does a business today talk to their consumers who are, lack of a better way to put this, like I am, 9 months in a one-bedroom apartment and out twice a week, and online on a regular basis and not willing to travel? How do they address that, and how do they approach their customers in such a way that they are still relevant as a brand?
At some level, it's almost like Voldemort, right? It's like he who shall not be named, right? I mean, nobody wants to have a whole virus conversation right now with a brand. I think we're, as you said, past that. But the information necessary to make a purchase in the pandemic is still incredibly vital, and nobody's going to make a purchase without it. Fun fact, data that I acquired since the last time I saw you says that 70% of consumers, and this data is from late November, so it's a month old. 70% of consumers say that ratings and reviews are more important than ever. Well, of course they are, because nobody knows nothing about nothing. You don't know how to buy anything. You don't know what experience to expect from anything. So as a brand, the most important thing you can do with content right now is build the ultimate FAQ, right? This kind of is right along the lines of my book, Utility, Marcus Sheridan's book, They Ask, You Answer. Your customers, it doesn't matter what you sell, they have more questions today about how to buy from you and what to expect than they have ever had since your company was created. Because the pandemic, you can't take any knowledge for granted. They don't even know if you're open, much less, what the return policy is. So the ultimate FAQ, I think, is really job one. And in many cases, and this is really ties into Vidyard as a sponsor, I think showing, not telling, is a better approach. There's an example I use in a keynote sometimes about an FAQ for 2 hospitals. One has a very long written FAQ about why it's so safe to come to the hospitals, and we're always sanitizing stuff, and everybody gets tested, and blah, 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 blah. It's very long, very comprehensive, unimpeachable in terms of its sort of quality and depth of content. But a different hospital has a 3.5-minute video that shows them sanitizing the chair legs in the waiting room. It's a lot less content, but it's much more persuasive because you see it with your eyes instead of reading 3,000 words of text about sanitation.
Yeah, makes a heck of a lot of sense. And there's some interesting pivots going on. Pivot seems to be I guess if dictionary were to come out this week with the 2020 word, it would be pivot, most likely, as far as that goes. But and I'm seeing that online where with my clients, there's a lot of people that I normally would not have had as clients, law firms, coaches, those type of things, who are all of a sudden saying, hey, I could do this because I'm virtual, and everybody's virtual these days. And I think that's one of the areas that I always want to talk about. So you are knee deep, best way to describe it, in amazing brands and iconic brands. You're also an observer of brand and what goes on with that, as a lot of us are. So are there brands that are standing out to you, client or not? And you can shout out your clients for sure, but clients or not, that are really, lack of a better way to put this, killing it as a result of what's the circumstances is best. They will describe it as the circumstances as opposed to the thing that's not supposed to be named.
I don't know if I would say killing it. Many of those who are killing it are actually having a challenge because of that. And I'll get to that in a second. But what I'm really impressed with is brands who've had to fundamentally reimagine and re-architect service delivery. So I'll give you an example. We got closets, new closets in our house. The closets the house came with were not working, which I discovered when I hung up my shirt and all the shirts fell on the floor. And as a guy who has 14 plaid suits, closet is not an insignificant part of my wish list for a house. And if you think about a company like California Closets or any of the closet guys, their history for, I don't know, 50 years, a long time, is they send somebody to your house with a tape measure and a notepad, and they walk around your house and they root around in your unmentionables and they make a bunch of drawings, and then they say, here's what we think your closet could look like. What do you think? Back and forth. And guys come in the house and rip out the old closets, put in the new ones. It's a lot of potential exposure. And almost all of those companies, because we got bids from 4 or 5 of them, almost all of them now have completely changed so that your closet consultant person does it like a FaceTime. You hold up the phone, you walk around your closet, they look at it, and then they give you a plan online. You never see them until the work crew comes in all masked and gloved to actually do the install. And that is, to me, so impressive, because a lot of the things that have happened in the pandemic were going to happen anyway. Telehealth, online school, work from home. These were all trends that were already happening, just accelerated by the pandemic. But something like that, where it's like, look, I've been a closet consultant for 20 years, and now you're an old dog and you have to learn a new trick overnight. To me, companies are not getting enough credit for that. And not all of them have been able to do it. But that, to me, is really amazing to see, because it's fundamental to how they do business. Like, yep, we can't do that anymore. We're going to do something different.
Yeah, you're seeing that. And not only that, but industries that didn't exist last year. Yeah. That are existing now. And actually she's my next guest next week is my business coach, Lori Marrero, actually hired a Zoom virtual background consultant to be able to make sure she was going to look well for her clients, because she, does business coaching on a regular basis. There's another one, and I would shout it out because it's an organization called Supply Drop. And Supply Drop only does one thing, and that is basically kitchen, bathroom, and household goods. And they will get it to you on time. And, they have become a business that is viable now. Yeah. Honestly, Jay, you and I talking last year at Concept Marketing World would never say, hey, you know what? I just ordered my 3-month supply of toilet paper, and it's going to be arriving on Amazon next week. You would have laughed at, like you're doing right now. You would have said, yeah, right. Okay, Chuck, whatever. Now it's a situation, right? As far as that goes. And honestly, bringing up tequila for sure. There's a couple of really good brands out there that are doing really well, local and national, in regards to everybody's drinking a little more than they used to be. So that's an aspect.
A couple of friends of mine own breweries and stuff too, and it's been really hard for them. Again, new breed of winners and losers, because when 40% or more of your overall throughput as a distiller or a brewery is over the rail in restaurants and bars, and that goes to 2%, right? You sure as hell better get a whole lot more people buying your stuff at the grocery store, or you're out of business. Mm-hmm. And so being able to shift where the consumer accesses your product is massive for those kind of businesses. And some have done it well, and others less so. It's fascinating, but sometimes you sort of end up with this pennies from heaven scenario, and the same way that you don't expect things to be bad, you didn't expect things to be this good, and that creates some challenges as well. I did 2 keynotes a month ago, one for the Association of Boat Dealers and one for the Association of RV Dealers. Very similar dynamics. Both are having record years. You can't even find a used boat in this country. Like if it sails, it sells. And RV sales through the roof, because you're like, well, I can't or don't want to get on a plane, but I'll get in my RV and go road tripping. And so they are absolutely besieged by new customers. The problem is their businesses aren't really architected for that level of volume. And so the customer experience that's being provided to all these first-time buyers is substandard. And they're getting super frustrated, and there's all kinds of bad message board posts and bad reviews. And and what I said to both of these organizations, and it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dealers on each call, I said, look, you guys if you don't invest in some customer experience enhancements here, this is going to be a blip on the radar. This is going to be 18 months of how that was incredible. And then all those first-time buyers are going to say, yeah, it sucked. and you're never going to get second-time buyers, and there won't be another circle of first-time buyers because the word of mouth will be so bad. And I firmly believe that. I think they are imperiled by a lack of experience. And I keep saying this, which is why so much of the work I do now is around customer experience more so than marketing. In a world of disruption, experience is king. The last thing anybody wants right now, Chuck, is any hassle at all. I don't want to wait 5 minutes. I don't want something to be shipping delays because of COVID. I don't want to be confused by price. I don't want anything other than smooth interactions with every business. And I think too many companies are focused on product, service, and price, and not enough are focused on experience.
So the PSP or the three Ps actually, but I mean, we're finding this, and let's talk about that. We're my estimation, which is boy, is it an amateur estimation, is at the earliest things are going to be reasonable by September of 2021. I don't think we're going to be anywhere near that. I mean, I talk a lot about the COVID blessings as a side note too. So one of them is, okay, now we know how to do virtual, and now we can understand that, and we can use it more often for consultants and speakers like us. It's a great thing to have that happen to a certain extent. And you and I have talked about this, and several other of our speaker colleagues have as well. Yeah, but I don't get the interaction that I would normally get with a live audience, and that can be an issue that we run into. But let's get back to the September 2021 at the minimum situation we run into. How can brands now adapt to what's going on and then be ready for whatever ends up being? It's not the new normal; it's the new reality that we are living in now. And what are you telling your brands as far as how do you interact with customers? You mentioned, okay, that's great, boat and RV guys, but be prepared to do X, Y, and Z. So talk to me a little further about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of businesses, boat and RV is the opposite, right? So for a lot of businesses, they have fewer customers now than they would have had in the past. And to me, that's the perfect time to really do some deep work on your experience. And the way I position this with my clients is there's a lot of things you could do in customer experience. There's only 3 that really matter. Your customers want you to be quick, they want you to be clear, and they want you to be kind. Quick, clear, kind. So between now and September, you've got 9 months to figure out how to be optimally quick, optimally clear, and optimally kind, so that when the cork goes shooting out of the bottle, whenever that occurs, your experience is tuned so that your word of mouth will bring you additional customers, and you can ride that momentum up when things get better. In fact, I'm doing a keynote next month, maybe it's February, for California tourism, and talk about a group that's hard times doesn't even begin to cover California tourism's current scenario. But I actually believe for them, just like I said, there's so much pent up demand, whether it's Disneyland or Yosemite or any of the other amazing attractions in the state, that once people feel comfortable, it's going to be a stampede. But just like the boat and RV dealers, if the experience isn't great, that stampede is going to slow to a crawl again. And now you've done lasting damage, right? You've done damage that is even worse than a pandemic, because bad customer experience reputation is something that will be a boat anchor on your customer acquisition a lot longer than when we get a vaccine.
Well, and it's interesting the perspective there too. I mean, you, Marcus Sheridan, a variety of folks have always talked about customer experience and FAQs and making sure that that's important. And this, to a certain extent, has just highlighted that and the need for that. And I understand quick and I understand clear. Talk to me about kind. What do you mean by kind when you're talking about a brand needs to be kind?
Chuck, you and I are old enough to remember a time when treating customers with kindness and respect and dignity and just humanity, we didn't have a name for it because it was just the default setting. I am, as you may know, a 7th generation entrepreneur. My son's an 8th generation entrepreneur. The number of conversations I ever had with my dad or my grandfather about treating customers well, 0 conversations. Never once in my entire life. Why? Because that's, of course, how you would treat customers. Like, it wasn't a conversation worth having. But somewhere along the way, we collectively lost our way, and we find ourselves where we are here, which is in an era of empathy deficit. In business, in life, certainly in politics, treating one another with kindness and respect and dignity and humanity is no longer the default setting. And as a human being, that makes me a little sad, frankly. But as a business consultant, I will tell you it's a tremendous opportunity, because now when you do treat your customers well, they actually notice it because they don't expect it. And customer experience is driven entirely by expectations. There is no such thing as objectively good or objectively poor customer experience. Customer experience is the delta between what you expect and what happens, or what you expect and what happens. And one of the areas where you can very much exceed customer expectations is in the area of humanity and kindness and empathy. So that doesn't mean the customer is always right. It doesn't mean you bend over backwards, but it does mean that you understand that, you know what, your customers are having some challenges too, and you interact with them accordingly. And I think it's a really important principle, and companies that embrace it are succeeding, partially because of it.
Well, and I'll harken back to the question I had for you earlier in regards to brands. What, and be generic if you need to on the negative side. But what brands are doing this aspect of empathy, kindness, whatever, well, and what brand, generic if you want, are blowing it, or are really having difficulties?
I'll think of an example just because it's probably one that most people have some frame of reference on, is Chewy, the pet supply company, right? Chewy.com has a great product selection, fair prices, frictionless buying experience for the most part, but their real differentiator is empathy, right? They treat customers with incredible kindness and respect and dignity, and how they handle customers, especially in trying times, has become legendary. They're almost like the new Zappos or the new Nordstroms, right? Where somebody wrote in and said, "Hey, I got to return these supplies because my dog just passed away," and they sent the dog owner a handwritten note and an oil painting of the dog. Those kind of things. And that's not a one-off, right? That's not this one time this one guy did a thing. They do that kind of stuff every day. And I know lots of pet owners, including my wife and myself, who will never spend a penny on any other pet-oriented brand ever. And it's because they care about their customers, and it's not a slogan. They prove it in action. And I just love that approach. And then, going back to my RV example, I won't mention the brand, it doesn't matter, but a friend of mine here in town, first-time RV buyer, and had her RV, I think, out two trips, I think, and then got it back, and the whole thing had flooded, water line burst, flooded the whole thing, mold everywhere, and tried for like 3 months to even get a hold of somebody to repair it. Wouldn't call her back. I mean, it was just a disaster. Just an absolute unmitigated disaster. And that's the kind of thing that will eventually kill a brand.
Yeah, makes total sense as far as that goes. I want to walk back to, we talked about this prior to going on air, but your courageous content presentation that you did at Concept Marketing World. Two things that stood out for me as well. You made the statements of the customers are too busy is a bad statement for a brand to believe, and then that the customers are now in charge. What do you mean by the customers are now in charge?
Well, if you think about content today, you used to be able to succeed either because you had the biggest budget, right? You would just spend a bunch of money to promote that content. Maybe it's paid search, paid social, etc. But the way the algorithms are set up now, Chuck, it doesn't matter what your budget is, right? In Google paid search, if you don't have a good relevancy score between ad and landing page, and you don't get a lot of clicks on your ad, and people don't spend time on the landing page post-click, they will actually suppress your reach regardless of what you've paid for that reach. Facebook works the same way. Twitter works the same way. LinkedIn works the same way. Gary Vaynerchuk said it best once when he said, no amount of budget can make a terrible ad successful. And he's exactly right. Even on the organic side, where you're not paying for an ad, but you're actually just creating content, you used to be able to try and win by just being better at algorithms. You're better at SEO. You're better at organic social. That's a pretty tough row to hoe now. Everybody's playing with the same tool sets. It's kind of hard to be so much better that, again, you can succeed just with okay content. So today, the way I like to describe it is that the audience is the algorithm. It is fundamentally impossible for any content to succeed if the audience doesn't want it to succeed. A show like this doesn't succeed without viewers, and viewers telling other people you need to tune into Chuck's extraordinarily good show. The audience is the algorithm, right? Word of mouth and social proof and sharing have all kind of converged into one thing, right? The audience is in charge. And so ultimately, if you don't have content that breaks through the enormous clutter that the audience is faced with and makes them feel something, and consequently want to tell somebody about your content, you are not likely to really succeed disproportionately.
Yeah. Makes total sense. So if I was, and I am, a entrepreneur that's kind of pivoted and started back out again, and advice for folks who are entering the marketplace now or are a brand that is trying to, quite frankly, navigate pretty difficult waters at this point in time. How do you move forward in 2021? What will allow you to have courageous concepts, as you like to talk about?
I think first and foremost, you have to think small, which may seem counterintuitive, but the reason why content doesn't succeed in most cases is that it is not relevant enough. Right, as you mentioned earlier, I talked about this a lot. When people say they don't have time to watch the show or listen to the podcast or read the ebook or follow you on social, whatever, that's total bullshit. That's not true at all. Everybody has time. When somebody tells you they don't have time, what they actually mean, but usually they won't say because they don't want to hurt your feelings, what they actually mean is that what you have provided is not relevant enough. It is not worth the time. It's not that they don't have the time. It's not worth the time. I know this to be true, Chuck, because if you give somebody the content that they want and you give it to them in the format they prefer and you put it in front of them at the right time, they will consume it. People always say, well, you know what? The only way you can succeed with content is short form. The number one podcast in this country overwhelmingly is the Joe Rogan Experience. Each episode's 3 hours long. Mm-hmm. Right? That's a straw man argument, obviously, but it's not about short. It's not about video versus text. It's just about relevancy. So if you want to succeed with content, Seth Godin calls this the minimum viable audience. And he's so right. What you've got to figure out is the smallest group of people who will think this is the single greatest version of this thing in the world. I had this exact same conversation last night, Chuck, with my son. My son's got a startup fashion label. He said, Dad, I'm having trouble growing the brand. I said, well, who's the customer? He's like, I'm like, nope. You need to come up with 15 people for whom this is the only brand they will ever wear. And once you understand exactly who those 15 people are, then you can grow it. But when people start podcasts, for example, I always say the audience is too big. The only way it works is if it's somebody's favorite show in the world. And the only way that can happen is if you understand precisely what they want and what they need, right? So too many people think big and they think, who's your target audience? Women 25 to 54. Good luck with that. Nope. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. When I'm working with clients and they are concerned about, I only have 20 likes on my post, or nobody's sharing it, or here's what it looks like. I always go back to, let's look at the analytics on it. Who is sharing it? Who is commenting on it? And what does that look? Are you hitting that target audience that you really set out to do? And it's hard in this, especially now in this online world that we live in, for us not to want validation on, basically describe it, a Facebook like, or whatever it may be. If you're chasing those, or you're chasing a LinkedIn post, like, comment, share, whatever it may be, you're chasing the wrong thing. You should be chasing the customer and making sure you are relevant to that customer. You brought up, and we talked about this earlier as well, Jay. I appreciate you coming on live. It's hard to get folks to come on live sometimes, but Seth Godin is one of them. I've talked to Seth several times, and I can't do live. I don't have, because of my schedule, I won't be able to do it. But my favorite phrase from Seth Godin is counterintuitive point of view. And that the best way to describe that is postman bit the dog. And so I'm talking to my clients, and I'm sure you are as well. Take a counterintuitive point of view. Everybody's doing X, Y, and Z. Try something different, and that's where I'm sorry.
Especially now.
Yeah, exactly. Especially now. So that kind of dovetails into your courageous content as well of taking a shot. We are knee deep in folks with content marketing calendars, and here's the themes, and here's what it's going to look like. What are you suggesting as far as how to be courageous and how to be different, how to have a counterintuitive point of view?
Yeah, there's a few ways to do it. I named 6 in that presentation. I mean, I'd get into all of those, but you can be courageously definitive, right? So it's kind of the ultimate version of that, right? It's the most comprehensive version of that content available. That takes time, money, effort. I find that to be courageous. That's one way to go, right? To sort of just out comprehensive your competition. You can be courageously relevant or specific, as we talked about a moment ago, and say, look, I don't care how many people necessarily consume this, but I want it to be incredibly perfect for a small group, the smallest viable audience, as Seth says. You can be courageously resonant, where you actually design content to make your audience feel, to move them in some way, to tears, to laughter. You create an emotion that causes them to share and support the content. That's one way to go. That often requires some measure of courage. You can be talkably useful, right? So the content itself becomes so helpful that you kind of forget that it's from a brand that's sort of taken right from the pages of my book Utility. That's another way to go. So there's all these different ways to break through. The problem is most people don't think of it that way, right? They're just kind of saying, hey, let's make pretty good content and we'll try a bunch of things. Then they're surprised that it doesn't actually work. Now with content being so competitive as a discipline, I would have a really hard time coming up with an example of truly successful sort of breakout content that doesn't take some risk somehow.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Because how could it succeed, right? All the easy fruit's been picked, right? So, you used to be able to succeed just because no one had ever written about that thing before. Like first mover advantage was a real thing in content. It's not now, obviously. There's no topic that hasn't been written about ad nauseum. So you better do it better or different, because doing it the same or doing it 3% better than what's already out there is a losing hand.
Absolutely. So, always and through different ways as to why I have to do it this way. But talk to me specifically about. We're going to go into 2 separate things, and then we're going to wrap up. But one thing in particular is your use and your team's use of social media. LinkedIn in particular, and how are you using it to reach your customers or find new customers? What's that looking like? Has that changed over the last year or so? And specifically, how are you using it?
So earlier this year, 2020, I was doing a fairly regular LinkedIn kind of video program, not live, but recorded around customer experience kind of opportunities and foibles, and really enjoyed it and had some measure of success with it. Once the pandemic kind of hit, it was sort of all hands on deck. And I set that project aside for a while and need to kind of bring that back here in the first quarter. We have used LinkedIn a lot more this year, just in terms of connecting with our customers and our prospects. We're big proponents of LinkedIn Sales Navigator, for example, and have actually, I don't want to say crack the code there, but it is part of our workflow and work style in a way it never was in the past. And then certainly for a lot of our clients on the B2B side in particular, working with them to create robust episodic LinkedIn content, especially in video, has been really effective. We've got a program with Oracle, a program with Cisco, several other brands where we are sort of producing behind the scenes ongoing kind of LinkedIn series, and it's been fantastic. I am still exploring the math around the LinkedIn algorithm, right? Every time I think I've got it figured out, I realize I don't quite have it figured out.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like we're posting too often, sometimes not enough. It's more the cadence that continues to be a little bit of a opaque deal for me, but we're working on it. We got our best people on it.
Good deal. And then finally, because my listeners and this will be replayed as well, always want to know, how can they get in touch with you if they're a brand that's interested in your work, or if they just want to have a conversation with you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
There's three things that we do, I should say. One, I do a lot of speaking, of course, workshops, keynotes, things along those lines. The company Convince to Convert, we have a whole team of strategists all over the country. We work with lots of interesting brands on digital strategy, content strategy, social strategy, customer experience strategy. And then our media brand, Convince to Convert, we do lots of virtual event production, podcast sponsorships, webinars, as I mentioned, influencer program management, things like that for brands all the time. The best place to find us is convinceandconvert.com. That's our award-winning site. Thousands of articles there, podcasts, etc. It's all right there. So you can find me at convinceandconvert.com, or obviously connect with me on LinkedIn.
Great. I appreciate your time, Jay. And we talked about this. We knew this was going to be an awesome conversation. Several comments have come in and said how relevant this is and how important it is to hear this type of thing. So I greatly appreciate you always, my friend, as a colleague and a friend and someone who's willing to spend some live time in that regard. So I really want to thank you again for your time, and we will definitely stay in touch, and have a great, happy New Year.
Thanks, you too, my friend. It was a blast, as I knew it would be. Really appreciate it. Best wishes to you and yours. Happy New Year. Congratulations on the great show. See you, everybody. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you. So that was Jay Baer. Our conversation, as I expected, it was robust and fun. I knew that was going to happen, so I greatly appreciate that. I want to take a couple of minutes here now. As you can imagine, as a Pay It Forward advocate, I want to go into our Pay It Forward Minute. And that's just a chance for me to talk specifically about some of the Pay It Forward stuff that we're doing, and one very big initiative that we've got going on right now. And that is the Pay It Forward Tuesday initiative. We have been doing this for the past 4 Tuesdays. Our last Tuesday was this Tuesday in December, where we actually, the Pay It Forward 5, that is Adam Sinkus, Jennifer Radke, Bob Shears, Lori Marrero, and myself. We have donated consulting time, 30 minutes each, to a nonprofit or to an up-and-coming entrepreneur to get a chance for them to have 2.5 hours of consulting on business, on social media, marketing, whatever they need and help with. So we're very excited about that. And our latest recipient, I want to shout her out, is Amy Gutman. She is the founder of HOPE, which is Hands-On Parents Empowering Foundation. And through the HOPE Foundation, Amy takes her years of experience in neurodevelopment and therapy and provides workshops for parents and communities to provide better education around mental health. Amy wants to build her foundation to provide more support to the community of parents and providers that support their children. So very excited to be able to come alongside Amy and her, what she's doing, and being able to help her move forward with the foundation. And we have some great news for you as well. We, the Pay It Forward 5, have decided to continue Pay It Forward Tuesdays into 2021. We will select a new recipient the third Tuesday of every month in 2021. So if you have someone who you think would be a good nominee, get in touch with me through LinkedIn as usual. And if you're a company or an organization that provides products and services to the small business and entrepreneurial community, you can participate in Pay It Forward Tuesdays as well. We are looking for sponsors that can provide services or products in kind for our 2021 recipients. There will be 12 of them in 2021. It's a great way to pay it forward while also building brand equity in your community. So contact me for more details and more information on that. So with that, we're going to wrap up, and I want to thank Vidyard. That's our sponsor, who is the video platform for business. If you go to vidyard.com/free, you can start a free trial there. I use it for some of my LinkedIn status updates. It's a really great place to be. So thank you, Vidyard. I appreciate your support as far as this goes. And then with that, next week, our conversation will be with my guest, Lori Marrero, who is a CMO of Solid Leaders. It's an organization that has been a pioneer in executive coaching and advising for over 30 years. She also happens to be a member of Pay It Forward 5. And oh, by the way, she's my business coach as well. Awesome person, a really good background. Looking forward to having that conversation. So please feel free to share this podcast with your friends and connections. The replay will post very soon on Facebook and YouTube. Also through Anchor.fm, the audio of the podcast can be found on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many other channels. And if you're interested in learning how to improve your marketing and LinkedIn presence, connect with me on LinkedIn and mention this podcast for a free 15-minute discovery call. So that's it for this week. Until next time, this is Chuck Hester wishing you a happy new year and an amazing 2021. Stay well, stay connected, and always pay it forward.